Things come and go out of vogue, but there are things that will never be seen again. Fortunately, the people around in that era can remember it and talk wistfully about it. Here are 20 things from the past that only 1960s kids will remember.
Scooby-Doo loves Scooby Snacks.
I like them too. We can make our own Scooby Snacks.
Scooby Snacks. If you were a kid in the 1960s, chances are you remember watching Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And daydreaming about what Scooby Snacks actually tasted like. These mystery dog treats were cartoon food, but they were so much more. They became some sort of bribery and motivation for both Scooby and Shaggy. Every time those two got scared, which by the way happened almost all the time, just the mention of a Scooby snack was enough to push them into facing ghosts, ghouls, and meddling kids territory. Back then, no one thought twice about wanting to eat something meant for a cartoon dog. Kids just knew they had to be good. They were the cartoon version of a reward system, and somehow they stuck in our brains like glue. Later, companies caught on and made real-life Scooby snacks, but by then, the magic had already happened.
In just 1 minute, it makes your hair strong, shiny, and easy to comb.
Feathered hair. Before flat irons, Instagram tutorials, or even blow dryers with diffusers, there was feathered hair, which was probably the most popular hair trend to ever come out of the 1960s and into the early 70s. Boys had it, girls had it, and everyone tried their best to get the perfect feathered back wave that flipped away from the face. For a minute, think about Farrah Fawcett and David Cassidy. The style looked super cool and perfectly put together all at once. However, pulling it off wasn't so easy. It involved brushes, patience, and just the right amount of hairspray to hold the swoop without turning your head into a helmet. Some kids even used large rollers or slept awkwardly trying to keep the shape. And if your hair didn't cooperate, too bad. No social media filters to help you out. Back then, hair was more than styles and more of personality. Feathered hair meant you cared about your look, but also wanted to be laid back and effortlessly cool. Tube top. Who could forget the tube top? It was the stretchy, shoulder-exposing shirt that became a surprise fashion figure in the late 60s. For kids growing up then, especially girls, it was the first taste of bold, carefree fashion. No straps, no sleeves, just one piece of elastic fabric that clung to your body and made you feel like you were stepping into your own world of fashion where you were the only star. Tube tops came in all sorts of colors and textures. There was the terry cloth, ribbed cotton, sequins if you were feeling fancy. And they weren't just for the beach or summer. You could pair them with bell-bottoms, short shorts, or a mini-skirt. And just like that, you have made a loud fashion statement. Of course, moms always raise eyebrows, but girls loved them. It made them feel like a grown-up.
Unbreakable Miracle Clackers are for everyone, even the little guys. Do it with both hands for Stereo Clackers.
Clackers. If you were a kid in the 1960s, chances are you either owned a pair of Clackers or knew someone who got a black eye from them. Clackers were two hard acrylic balls attached to a string with a small loop for your finger in the middle. The goal was to swing them up and down so they smacked together above and below your hand in a rhythmic clack, clack, clack motion. Yeah, it sounds simple enough, but in practice, not so much. These toys were loud, addictive, and dangerous. When they clacked right, it felt like you had superpowers, but when they didn't, you risked a face smack or shattered plastic. Some even exploded on impact. Still, kids loved the challenge. Eventually, they were banned from many schools because of safety concerns. Schoolhouse Rock. Before YouTube or online learning apps came into existence, kids in the 1960s and 70s learned grammar, math, and history through catchy songs and clever cartoons. This is all thanks to Schoolhouse Rock. This Saturday morning staple was more than just entertaining. It actually taught us stuff without us even realizing we were learning. With songs like Conjunction Junction, I'm Just a Bill, and 3 is a Magic Number, the show used animation and music to make complex topics fun and memorable. You'd be humming Lolly, 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 Get Your Adverbs Here for days, and before you know it, you would have aced your English quiz without even opening a book. What made Schoolhouse Rock special was that it respected kids' intelligence. It didn't talk down or get overly complicated. It just broke things down in a way that made sense. The Electric Company. If you flipped on the TV in the early 1970s, right after Sesame Street, you probably caught The Electric Company. It was a bold, funky, and fast-paced show that helped 1960s kids sharpen their reading and language skills. It was produced by the same folks behind Sesame Street. The Electric Company brought together a diverse cast, clever animation, hilarious skits, and music that actually slapped. We're talking about a show that had a young Morgan Freeman in special outfits and cool glasses playing characters like Easy Reader and Vincent the Vegetable Vampire. And who could forget Rita Moreno yelling, "Hey you guys," at the top of her lungs? The show wasn't afraid to be weird, funny, or edgy. It felt like the classroom had been hijacked by the cool teacher with a guitar. It taught phonics, grammar, and vocabulary, but in a way that made you laugh and sing along.
We introduced our realistic CB line way back in 1960.
CB radios. Around the time when cell phones and texting was still something people dreamed of, if you wanted to stay in touch while on the road, or you were a trucker, you could get a CB radio. In the 60s and especially into the 70s, citizens band CB radios became a huge trend. It wasn't just truck drivers using them. Families, teens, and hobbyists got in on the action too. CBs had their own cool slang. 10-4 meant okay, and breaker 1-9 was how you jumped into a conversation on Channel 19, the go-to frequency. People created unique handles or nicknames like Lone Wolf or Sugar Mama and had entire conversations without ever meeting face-to-face. It was anonymous, a little unusual, and tons of fun. The real charm was that it made people feel connected. Guess what? You could use it to warn someone about a traffic jam and avert potential delay or just joke around with strangers. There was just something special about those crackly voices across the airwaves.
One trapper for each subject.
Where do you keep them?
In the Trapper Keeper, which also has a notepad and pencil clip.
Trapper Keepers. If you walked into school with one of these in the late 60s or 70s, especially when they really took off, you were basically showing up with a portable command center. It has bright colors and is covered in designs like rainbows or race cars, and most importantly, it had that satisfying Velcro flap. Trapper Keepers had everything like built-in pockets, slots for pens, dividers for subjects, and even a place for notes from your crush or scratch and sniff stickers. It kept your schoolwork organized. This was your identity in binder form. Neat freaks loved it, doodlers decorated it, and everyone else just wished they had one. Swapping out covers, comparing colors, or peeking into a friend's to see how they arranged theirs became part of school culture. Teachers may have rolled their eyes at the noise from the Velcro, but kids wouldn't have it otherwise. The FisherPrice chatter telephone. Hold on a sec, you should probably remember this one. A chunky plastic phone with big googly eyes, a smiley face, and a colorful rotary dial. The FisherPrice chatter telephone was a classic toy that lived in almost every living room or preschool back in the day. Kids would drag it around by the red string like a loyal puppy, and every time it moved, the eyes would bounce and the wheels would go clickety-clack across the floor. Many people would of course remember it as a toy, but for the 1960s kids, it was their first phone. They'd mimic grown-up conversations by spinning the dial with those satisfying clicks and babbling into the red receiver like they had real business to handle. Some even tried to call Santa, Grandma, or their imaginary friend. It didn't matter that it wasn't plugged in, their imaginations filled in the rest. Lightbreate. There was something magical about sitting in a dim room, plugging tiny colored pegs into a black screen, and watching your creation light up from behind. That was Lightbreate, a simple toy, but pure joy for any kid growing up in the 60s and beyond. Whether you followed the paper templates to make a butterfly, rainbow, or clown, or you made your own wild design, Lightbreate made you feel like an artist. The little pegs, red, blue, green, yellow, and white, snapped into place with that satisfying pop. And the glowing results were downright intriguing. It wasn't about competition or high-tech gadgets. It was just you, your imagination, and a glowing box of creativity. Parents loved it too because it was quiet. No batteries running wild, no noise, just a calm glow and focused kids. For many 60s kids, their first real experience with art, color, and design came through Lightbreate. Metal lunchboxes. Before lunchboxes became soft, collapsible, and kind of boring, kids in the 60s carried their sandwiches and snacks in hard, clunky, colorful metal lunchboxes. Whether yours had the Jetsons, the Beatles, Scooby-Doo, or Superman on the front, your lunchbox said something about who you were. Opening one was like opening a treasure chest. Inside, you'd find a matching thermos, usually filled with milk or soup, and maybe a PB&J sandwich, some chips, and a Twinkie if you were lucky. The smell of metal mixed with your packed lunch is oddly unforgettable. Metal lunchboxes were sturdy. You could drop them, sit on them, and even swing them like a weapon on the playground if it came to it. They could take a beating, but they always looked cool. Eventually, schools and safety concerns led to the switch to plastic and fabric, but nothing replaced that feeling of walking into the lunchroom with your favorite characters in hand. Disco balls. Even if you were still a kid in the 60s, you probably remember your first encounter with a disco ball. It might have been at a roller rink, a school dance, or watching an older sibling get ready for a night out. The moment that mirrored ball started spinning and reflecting light all over the room, it was like magic had entered the building. As disco culture took off toward the late 60s and into the 70s, so did the presence of these shiny orbs. They turned even the most boring spaces into groovy party zones. Wait, it gets better. If you paired that with the right music Bee Gees or Donna Summer, then you had a recipe for unforgettable memories. For kids, it meant wonder. For adults, it meant letting loose. And for everyone in between, it meant fun. Even today, disco balls are still around, but for the 60s kids, it meant unending dance. The smell of fresh Ditto copies. If you went to school in the 1960s, there's one smell you'll never forget. Yeah, the sharp, slightly sweet scent of fresh Ditto copies. Before laser printers and photocopiers took over, teachers used a spirit duplicator, which was also called a mimeograph, to crank out quizzes, worksheets, and handouts. The freshly printed pages came out purple-inked, slightly damp, and smelling strangely good. Kids would lean in and take a deep sniff like it was some kind of classroom treat. Weird, maybe, but it became a strange little ritual getting your copy and immediately inhaling that fresh-off-the-press aroma. It was the smell of school. These copies weren't perfect, as they sometimes got smudged, faded, or ran, but they were part of everyday learning. Teachers even had to type out entire pages manually on carbon paper before running them through the machine. Dodgeball. Back in the 1960s, dodgeball wasn't just a game. It was a raw battlefield. Kids played it during recess or gym class, and it involved a big open court, 2 teams with just one mission: throw that rubber ball as hard as you could without getting hit yourself. The red rubber balls weren't soft either. They had a sting when they made contact, and if you caught one square in the face, everyone heard it. But that was part of the excitement. You'd duck, weave, leap, and maybe even take one for the team. Victory only came when your team was the last one standing. There were no foam balls, no headshot rules, only fast throws and a lot of yelling. Teachers sometimes turned a blind eye to the chaos, and kids loved every second of it. Dodgeball was competitive, wild, and for better or worse. Come on, a game like that had to be. If you made it out of dodgeball with pride intact and a few bruises, then you were a champion.
Stop, evildoers!
Stretch Armstrong, I will destroy you.
Stretch Armstrong. Though Stretch Armstrong officially came out in the 1970s, some kids in the late 60s caught early glimpses or prototypes of stretchy toys that would lead to his creation. And once Stretch landed in homes, he was unforgettable. With his blonde hair, buff chest, and swim trunks, Stretch looked like a surfer dude superhero, but his real magic was inside. You could pull his arms, stretch his legs, twist his torso, and he'd always bounce back to shape. That squishy, gel-filled body made him feel like a science experiment and action figure rolled into one. Kids would often challenge each other to see how far they could stretch him, sometimes from one end of the room to the other. And yes, some curious kids cut him open. Yeah, it turned out to be a bad idea, but curiosity got the best of them. Inside, they found a weird gooey corn syrup mixture, and once it was out, it was game over. Saturday morning cartoons. Before Netflix and on-demand streaming, Saturday mornings were sacred. For kids in the 1960s, waking up early meant one thing, and that was cartoons. It was the only time all week when networks cleared their schedules for a solid block of animated fun. You'd grab a bowl of cereal, plop down in front of the TV, and stay glued there for hours. Classics like The Jetsons, Scooby-Doo, Yogi Bear, The Flintstones, and Johnny Quest filled the airwaves. There was no pause button, no rewind, and definitely no binge watching. If you missed it, you missed it, so being up and ready was serious business. There was something magical about those mornings. Parents were still asleep, the house was quiet, and the cartoons felt like a personal gift just for you. It created a routine that felt safe and special week after week. Saturday morning cartoons also came with catchy jingles, sugary cereal ads, and toy commercials you'd beg your parents about later. How time flies indeed. Milk in glass bottles. Back in the 1960s, milk didn't come in cardboard cartons or plastic jugs. It arrived at your doorstep in heavy glass bottles. The milkman was a real part of daily life, delivering fresh milk early in the morning, often with a smile and a wave. The bottles had metal caps or sometimes cardboard stoppers, and when you pulled one off, there was a thick layer of cream floating at the top. If you didn't shake the bottle first, then you would have cream in your cereal bowls. Some families even had a little insulated milk box outside to keep the bottles cool. And yes, if it was winter, the milk could freeze and pop the cap right off. Recycling wasn't trendy, it was the norm. You rinsed out the empty bottles and set them out for the milkman to pick up the next day. Earth shoes. If your mom or older siblings wore earth shoes in the late 60s, you'll never forget them. With their unique negative heel design, where the heel sat lower than the toe, Earth shoes promised better posture, improved back health, and a more natural way of walking. They were part fashion, part lifestyle, and unforgettable. They didn't look like anything else at the time. Chunky, wide-toed, and sort of awkward in appearance. They stood out in a world that was still dominated by saddle shoes and pointy flats. But that was the point. Earth shoes were part of the growing counterculture. People wore them to show they were into nature, health, and doing things differently. Some people swore by them. Others said they felt like walking uphill all the time. But one thing was certain, it made a difference and got people talking. Big wheels. If you were a kid in the 1960s, there is a big chance that you either had a big wheel or begged your parents for one. These low-to-the-ground plastic tricycles were loud, fast, and felt like the ultimate taste of freedom. With their oversized front wheel and molded plastic seat, big wheels were built for action, even if the only terrain you tackled was the sidewalk. Kids would race down driveways, spin out at corners, and pull wild 180-degree turns that left streaks on the concrete. The sound of those hard plastic wheels still echoes in the memories of an entire generation. And forget helmets. This was a time when you rode barefoot, hair flying, grinning like you were in a mini NASCAR race. The cool kid on the block was usually the one with the shiniest big wheel. And for siblings, nothing sparked backyard rivalry quite like a race to the end of the street. Beanbag chairs. Back in the late 1960s, furniture suddenly got way more fun. The beanbag chair became popular. It was a big, squishy, shapeless blob that somehow became the coolest seat in the house. It was filled with little pellets of foam or plastic. These chairs molded to your body the moment you flopped into one, making you feel like you were floating in your own personal cloud. They were perfect for almost everything, watching TV, reading comic books, or just lounging with friends. And they came in every color imaginable. Bright orange, neon green, mustard yellow, even weird patterns. Kids loved them because they were comfy. Parents tolerated them because they were cheap. But everyone agreed that beanbag chairs were fun, funky, and totally of their time. Of course, they weren't exactly the most supportive seats. After a while, the beans would flatten and you'd sink all the way to the floor. But that didn't matter. They had done their jobs. What do you think of these things? Did you use or experience any of these? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more.